Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink, it is time for some PathOfExile discussion. Today I wanted to return for episode 5 in a series looking at popular endgame unique items. Today we're going to go with something that is at the more accessible end of the endgame spectrum. I did run a poll of 5 possible items over on my YouTube channel, and this was the one that won that poll as the one most people wanted to hear about first. The Taming is an item that late in a mature trade league is generally available for 20 to 30 Chaos Orbs, and even quite early in a trade league it's generally less than 100. And that's because it's an item that you get by a vendor recipe, and that vendor recipe requires 3 inputs. 2 of these are tier 4 drop anywhere uniques, aka very common items, and the third one is a tier 3 drop anywhere unique. We'll come to how you acquire this in a sec, but let's have a quick look at its stats first. Very simple item, really. It provides you with a big gob of resistances. If it's perfectly rolled, it's going to be 40% to each of lightning, cold, and fire resistance. If it's less well rolled, then obviously these stats are going to be lower. Then we have the reason, though, that you're going to equip the Taming, and this is all of the damage stats that it provides. Now, Turbulent Catalysts are the ones you're going to want to use on this ring, and if you ever want to check which catalysts you can use, I'll put a link down below to the POE page for the Taming, and you'll notice here that when we have a look here at each of the different mods, it specifies that 8 to 10% to elemental resistances, this is elemental in resistance, and it's Prismatic Catalysts. For 30% increased elemental damage with attack skills, that's Turbulent or Abrasive Catalysts. 30% increased elemental damage is just Turbulent. 20 to 30% all ally resistances is Prismatic, but again, we're going to want to go with something else here because this is a damage ring first and foremost. Then we have the things that relate to ailments, and those do not have any catalysts listed to them. That's something that might catch you a bit off guard. A lot of people expect that this 20% increased damage with hits and ailments per freeze, shock, or ignite on an enemy might be tied to a Turbulent Catalyst, but it's not actually considered to be an elemental damage modifier. Anyways, interactions with catalysts out of the way, this is going to provide you with up to 60% increased damage with hits and ailments, as long as you're able to inflict a freeze, a shock, and an ignite on enemies. Technically, you can raise this up to 80% if you manage to increase your ignite cap, but there's no way to do that that will be practical on a build that would consider equipping the Taming, so we'll pretend that option doesn't exist. Then you have your flat 36% increased elemental damage with catalysts, and 36% increased elemental damage with attack skills. If you have a freeze, a shock, and ignite on an enemy, then this combination is going to be a 132% increased damage. And fundamentally, that's the Taming for you. That is a huge amount of percentage increased damage, which is one of those things that you can get quite a bunch of on the character, but it's really good to get huge individual sources of it. It gives you a whole bunch of damage, it patches up your resistances, but it provides you with no specialized defenses. There's no life on this, no energy shield, no chaos resistance, and none of the other defensive modifiers that you might look for on a ring sometimes, such as reduced effective curses on you, or any form of mitigation of ailments. Instead, you're getting the very basics, but you're getting a lot of them. And that's where the Taming really shines. Now let's talk about how you get this. There are 2 ways that you can get this ring that are practical. The first one of them I don't recommend, and that is to turn in a set of the Divination card Hunter's Reward. The reason I don't recommend this is that the best way to get this Divination card realistically is actually from Searing Exarch Altars, and by the time you manage to get a set of Hunter's Reward from Searing Exarch Altars, you will have a lot more copies of the other Divination card we're going to discuss here. And that Divination card relates to the vendor recipe for the Taming. You need to vendor Berek's Grip, Berek's Pass, and Berek's Respite simultaneously in order to receive the Taming from a vendor. Additionally, there's a couple of uncommon modifiers items can have, like being Shaper influenced. If every single one of the inputs has those uncommon modifiers, then so too will the Taming that you get from it. Whilst the Grip and Pass rings are very good to equip on low level characters, these are not really rings that people want to equip beyond about level 50 or 60, and realistically at endgame their only application is to feed them into this vendor recipe. These are tier 4 rarity uniques, so not very rare. Berek's Respite is perhaps 5 times rarer than those rings. This is the one of the 3 rings that's compelling to equip on its own because of its ability to proliferate shocks and ignites simultaneously through packs, and to do so in a way that is different to other proliferation mechanics. Not necessarily better or worse, but just different. A lot of people who are playing Elementalists will want this ring to equip themselves. However, in order to get the Taming, you're going to need to destroy one, because you're going to need to vendor the triad of Berek's rings. Once you do perform the vendor recipe though, you've got yourself the Taming. The reason I mentioned that there's a Divination card involved though, is that one of the more deterministic ways to farm the rarer component of this, which is Berek's Respite, is to farm the divination card, the Spark and the Flame. The Spark and the Flame can be found in the Atoll map, which is basically always on the Atlas. It's not super common, but it's also not rare. This divination card's about twice as rare as the Fortunate, so if you've got a bit of a sense as to how long it takes to farm 2 copies of the Fortunate, you got a sense also as to how long it's going to take to get 1 copy of the Spark and the Flame, and of course, you're going to need 2 because it's a set of 2. That said, this provides a deterministic way to get the rare component, and once you've got this, you've basically got yourself the Taming, because in the time that you're farming the Spark and the Flame, you're almost certain to get yourself the other 2 Berek's rings. I will add as well that if you've had bad experiences farming Berek's Respite or the divination card for it in the past, Berek's Respite used to be a lot rarer than it is now. It was dropped from Tier 1 to Tier 3 in patch 3.19 and Calandra League, and as a result, it's now something like 12 times as common as it used to be in earlier incarnations of the game. So, if you've had bad experiences farming this in the past, it's not so bad now, but it will still take a little bit of time. And of course, grinding gear games do sometimes shake up rarities, so I can't guarantee that if you're watching this after 3.24, that it is still going to be a Tier 3. Anyway, that's the Taming. A very simple item, but one that a lot of people don't realise exists because it's not something that can be a direct drop from monsters, even though it is pretty easy to get your hands on, and it is very, very good, especially on bow-based tri-elemental attack builds, which have been popular for several leagues now. This is the sort of item that you might outgrow late in your character's progression. You might pick this up about the time you hit level 85, be very happy with it until about the time you hit level 94 or so, and then at that point, you might start looking for a rare item that offers a bit more overall to your build. Maybe something that provides a curse on hit, as well as having some of the other good stats that are found on the Taming, or something else entirely that deals with one of the weaknesses of your build. Anyways, that's all I got on this one. It is one of the simpler ones. That's good because the next video in this series is going to be tackling one of the most complex items in the game, the Precursor's Emblem. May your Varlorbs have interesting results.